Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have not done a fireside chat in a while and thought that I would do so tonight. This is being videoed on October 31st to be posted on November 1st, if something comes out of it, which is not certain. I think I may have touched on all of the topics which have been playing about in my mind previously, and so I apologize for the duplication. I am quite sure I'm going to talk about my chapbook, Inaugural Considerations, and the poems I have written tangential to the presidency of my country, the United States of America. I brought out this book, Sallust, for no particular good reason. I haven't read this edition. I've read the Penguin, which I believe contains the Catalan conspiracy and the Jurgothian War, but omits the histories. So I have intentions one day of reading through all of the ancient historians, at least such as are available in Penguin and Oxford editions. I have them all assembled. It would take, I figure, a good half year of dedication to do it, but I think it would be worth the doing. Be that as it may, I am often thinking upon the Catalan conspiracy. Right now, our President Biden has been given all kinds of unprecedented powers by the Trump Supreme Court, which they put into place, assuming that a Democrat would not avail himself of their use, but that a President Trump would. We are now in the midst of an election campaign, 1 week, less than 1 week away until the actual voting takes place. Steve Donahue does not think the voting will amount to much. I am not sure what will happen, but Steve will often go, now I was going to say late at night, but it's not always so, go on and do a live stream because he wants to unburden himself of some of the anxiety that he has been feeling as a resident of this country, or we might say this great country, to make it political sounding, for a long time, for quite a bit of his life, and residing in such a bastion of Americana as the city of Boston. His thoughts and emotions are very much tied up into the fate of our country, and he observes things occurring which are unprecedented. And I believe we probably will see things unprecedented forthcoming in this next week or so. Now, I have been a writer of poetry for most of my life, and it just so happens that a lot of the poems that I have written have found themselves, I shouldn't say a lot of the poems, but in any book that I wrote, there would always be at least one or two that found themselves tied into the trajectory of my country. It would be in the form of possibly commentary or just description. Let me show you one example of what I mean. So this is a poem, a book from 2002 or 2003, I'm not sure. And it was copyright 2003, but I know that. I'm just not sure when it was written, either 2 or 3. And the very second poem of this deals with Abraham Lincoln, and it is called Lincoln in the Rain. And I'll just read that poem to you. Abraham Lincoln in the rain upon the platform stood, gave his farewell and voiced his pain that he might leave for good the land that nurtured him so well, the land that held a son, because a great task on him fell, and duty must be done. Greater than that which rested on the shoulders, as he said, of President George Washington, the task that lay ahead. Rumors of his assassination were known, but undeterred, he headed for his destination, and every heart was stirred. When the assassination came, he had worked many years, indefatigable, his name all history reveres. He left his major task fulfilled, bequeathing unto men a legacy on which to build each humble citizen. As indeed he did. The party which he helped to found, the Republican Party, has gone off the rails, so to speak. I just saw a good interview with Mehdi Hasan, or by Mehdi Hasan, I'm not sure, in which he talks about the current Republican Party and where it's at for the last number of decades. It has been a heavy proponent of something that is called the culture wars. And he rightly points out it is not culture wars at all, which implies some kind of two-sided contest. It has been the party trying to stir up all kind of vitriol to conceal or to mask the fact that it has no ideas, no solutions to help out the poor, white, rural voter that make up much of its political base. It has no ideas, and so it wants to cause distractions. My first election as a voter happened to be the contest between Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. And I was a suburban boy, and I did not like Carter. I saw President Ford in person. I wanted to see Ford, actually, because I really liked Ford, and I was so brokenhearted when Carter beat him. Shortly after casting my vote for Reagan, I was in college, and I realized I began to learn what an idiot I had been. And the rest of my life has only confirmed the absolute greatness of Jimmy Carter as a president and as a human being. He has received more credit for the activities he has done post-presidency. But what he did as president, I can think of a couple things that were really great and ahead of their time. He installed solar panels at the White House. He reduced the speed limit on our highways to 55 miles per hour. Both excellent ideas, excellent projects. The backlash was severe. Ronald Reagan came into office, ripped out those solar panels, and soon enough, all of those speed limits were back up high. The whole progress of my country from the time of Reagan has been a bad one. It has been a progress away from any semblance of reality informing the political discourse. I have always believed that a lot of the problem comes from the fact that President Nixon, who incited criminal activities was never prosecuted. He got a pardon, got off scot-free, and so that only encouraged people of like mind, people who like to gain via dishonorable means, whatever gain they're seeking. Not to say history has not lauded such a thing. I mean, this country is built on slavery, which I think we can all agree is a dishonorable means to earn one's livelihood. But let us leave that aside for the moment. It is now pretty well known, it has been pretty well confirmed that one of the reasons that Ronald Reagan managed to win the presidency so handily was because there was a hostage situation going on. The American embassy in Iran, I think it was, had been overtaken by militants, by Iranian youth, I think, and Ronald Reagan made a deal with these hostage takers to the effect that they would not release the hostages until after the election. I have not read this in detail, but it has been written about. It has recently, I say recently, in the last couple of years, pretty much been confirmed. But the first writer who really brought it up and investigated and researched it died as a suicide or as a suicide. But so from that time on, the former party of Lincoln let itself do anything. It resorted to any dishonorable tactic it could dream of in order to gain the upper hand in an electoral contest. So of course, if you have read my works, such as the Requiem, I think, you will know that George H.W. Bush got the bulk of my opprobrium. I think on, it might have been the last Fireside Chat, I read something from Embodiment and Release, which was a short poem titled Bush Smear, just alluding to the fact that the Bush campaign in particular had decided to make one of its major pillars the act of slander, of libel, the act of defamation. And that has continued. A functioning democracy cannot condone that kind of behavior, but ours let it pass. Now, and this again, I think is pretty much what I've covered before, but as I say, I'm just going to repeat this. At the time that Bill Clinton was elected to his second term, I wrote a poem which was an inaugural poem. Democrats have had the habit since Clinton, I believe, of always including a poem at the inaugural ceremonies. The Republicans, being opposed to culture, have avoided that one-sided tradition. And I may have even read that. So, at the time that Barack Obama won his election, that was 2008, was it? I thought that I would write a poem for his inaugural as well. And I went to great lengths to try to get it to him. Not so easy. I don't know that he ever saw it. I doubt that he did, but it was not used. But I wanted my friends, and at that time I was more actively involved with the poetry community. So I put out a little chapbook, and it was called The Poem Not Taken. I have often been one to munch on my sour grapes, and so that was this, and it included the poem that I wrote for Obama's inaugural, which I have since said the words which should have been spoken at his inaugural. He gave a good speech, as I recall, but I don't believe the poem was so appropriate to the situation. I believe that was the one written by and spoken by Elizabeth Alexander, who happens to be an exact contemporary of mine. And then to fill out the book, I added the one that I had done for Clinton. Now that was a poem initially from this book, The Soul's Refinement, which, as far as the non-fit imprint goes, was the fourth book in the imprint, although it was the last one to have been published. So I just duplicated it for the sake of the chapbook. Now, when I decided to go to Lulu and set things up, I came up with another version of it, The Poem Not Taken, and I think I added, a preface to the second edition, so just to fill it out a little bit. But otherwise, the contents were the same. And then I revised it again, and I think this was at the time that Trump was elected, and so I updated it again. That's right. I think I went into more detail about that in the other video, which I probably cannot find. It may well have been the other Fireside chat, which I did. And so I included a poem, Indifference, an inaugural poem for Donald Trump, and Hail to Our Departing Chief for Obama. So that was all of the content which I added for that edition. It is not certain whether our country, as it was established, will continue. These are indeed contentious times. And I don't understand a lot the dynamics behind people's choices of their votes. So a lot of folks who are against the genocide which is occurring in Gaza, perpetrated by the state of Israel and funded very much by the United States, are very dissatisfied, let us say, with the Biden presidency, which has allowed this to happen and continues to allow it to happen. So in Michigan, you have a sizable Arab American population, and they have largely decided to vote against Kamala Harris. And it's an interesting dynamic, as I say. Mehdi Hassan, again, has been my sort of beacon in navigating these waters, because his view is that, especially in a swing state like Michigan, when you cast your vote, you have to cast it with a view to the ultimate consequences to come from that vote, as opposed to some other motivation, such as getting something off of your chest or making a statement, so to speak. And in Chicago, our votes probably don't count for much. The votes of rural voters count across the country more than the votes of city people, even though us city dwellers, or we city dwellers, are more populous. we are the majority. But the whole country has been set up in order to give these rural folks the advantage, plus you have the other advantage conferred by the Electoral College in various ways, where states of little population, again, rural states, have an inordinate sway or an inordinate weight in the contest. And so Mehdi Hasan has talked about Donald Trump as saying that Joe Biden has restrained Netanyahu and that Netanyahu should finish the job and should press further than he has done his what appears to be an extermination campaign against, well, various populations at this point. But these, and I should say that there's a wonderful museum in Detroit if you ever get to go there, an Arab American museum. But this is not at all to point the finger at Arab Americans. Let them vote as they will. A lot has been said. If this election goes in favor of Donald Trump and against the Democratic Party, the blame must fall with white America. The Democrat Party has not carried a majority of white America for a long time. So, for this nation to exist going forward, things have to change, and there's very little sign that anything can change at this time. Steve Donahue, again, will make ample reference to the fact that folks in the Donald Trump camp are either shameless exploitational, ambitious nullities, or they are cult members. And what has to happen, regardless of what does happen, eventually is people have to get back to facing reality a little bit, which is an odd proposition to be made by a poet when so much of poetry is about fiction or about fictive constructions. So, President Carter voted. He availed himself of early voting. I have voted as well. He has been in hospice care for over a year. He is 100 years old now. I don't know how much the esteem which has finally settled upon his reputation is known to him, or if it is known to him, how much it matters to him. I would suppose he wants to see the country persist. It's interesting that we probably have not had a man as good as Jimmy Carter in the office. Possibly we have. The Adamses certainly were good men, I think. So there's no way to really compare. And almost certainly we have never had as intelligent a man as Jimmy Carter. And he has not gotten not a lot of credit for that. But I think Come on, guys. Somebody was whistling outside on the street. And of course, they heard that. I don't know that it was a dog whistle. Interestingly, you may recall the story, two of our earliest presidents, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, both died on the 4th of July at the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I guess that was. Now, nobody knows exactly how the 4th of July was arrived at, but that has become the national holiday. And one has the sense of men holding out to the last minute because that day was an important one in their memory. I would not be surprised if, even though he has already cast his ballot, if Jimmy Carter expires soon after the voting. However, he's a very strong man, and sometimes the body just does not let the person go. I remember when he first went into the hospice care, it was said, oh, he'll be dead within a week. Well, I remember hearing that on BookTube, as a matter of fact. And I said to the screen, oh, you have not been paying attention, have you? Jimmy Carter, the man who had, what was it, stage 4, some kind of cancer, et cetera, and bounced back. But I think that his time probably will be coming. I'm not trying to make any kind of prediction here, believe me. When that happens, I will make a revision to this little chapbook. Possibly I will even put that one about Lincoln into it. I will, of course, have to fit some kind of a prose context for the material. If, indeed, I survive long enough to do so. And then, if I do, I can't make, these things are put up at Lulu. I mean, I would like to get rid of the X from my name. I've said that a lot. But the formatting and everything has changed. I would have to redo covers. The old cover manager does not exist. You can see with both of these editions, I just left the cover the same. I'd have to redo everything. And it's not a task that I am keen on undertaking. I will let somebody else do it, perhaps. But I am expressing my intentions at this point. So I have stopped reading on the 31st in honor of his birthday. I posted a long poetry reading focusing on John Keats, and that was a very centering activity for me. John Keats has played an important role in my life as a poet, and his birthday has always been a day of moment, or a momentous day of notice to me personally when it rolls around. And so in this time of centrifugal flaying or flailing around. It was good to have that. I recently finished reading the Henry Adams History of the United States of America. I wanted to finish it prior to the election. Initially, my plan was just to take the whole year doing it, but it proved to be less than I thought. And so I devoted my last days solidly to focusing on that and getting it done. Because particularly if the representative democracy, which we have, fails at this point, the history of the United States of America will become really obsolete as far as I'm concerned. It will not be something that I am interested in as a matter of study. My whole progress as a poet has been with the living trajectory of the people of this land. The governmental structure has had to be taken into account, but no more than that. Of course, I am retired now. There is an outside chance that I will write plays again. I doubt it. And here and there, I've done poems. I have a few poems about the situation in Gaza. And again, that just calls up to mind this idea that it is such a strange thing to me that people feel that their personal feeling, their personal need to make a statement is more important than the actual consequence to come of their actions in the ballot box, in this case. The Republican Party has spared no effort to try to make the population, the populace, ignorant, even stupid. That has been a concerted effort. It has not happened accidentally. And of course, it has happened in concert with corporations and so forth. I, of course, hold to the John Stuart Mill idea that to have a functioning democracy, you need to have people who are involved and who understand. And the act of being involved in what is occurring is supposed to make people want to educate themselves. That has not happened. And so we appear primed to see some other sort of form of government take over. So as in the time of Cicero, the old Roman Republic fell and was replaced by what we have come to call the Roman Empire. In our case, it's hard to predict if the representative democracy falls, what will come to replace it. I also pulled out a copy of Lincoln. I have the Library of America 2-volume set, which I highly recommend, but it's good to have something handy for when you just want to refer to something. And I thought I would read the second inaugural address of Abraham Lincoln. We are so used to hearing all of this incoherence from our elected officials, and I thought I would just read his incredibly famous second inaugural address from March 4th, 1865, just to remind folks how a president should sound. At this second appearing to take the oath of the presidential office, there is less occasion for an extended address than there was at the first. Then a statement, somewhat in detail, of a course to be pursued seemed fitting and proper. Now, at the expiration of 4 years, during which public declarations have been constantly called forth on every point and phase of the great contest which still absorbs the attention and engrosses the energies of the nation, little that is new could be presented. The progress of our arms, upon which all else chiefly depends, is as well known to the public as to myself, and it is, I trust, reasonably satisfactory and encouraging to all. With high hope for the future, no prediction in regard to it is ventured. On the occasion corresponding to this 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to an impending civil war. All dreaded it, all sought to avert it. While the inaugural address was being delivered from this place, devoted altogether to saving the Union without war, insurgent agents were in the city seeking to destroy it without war, seeking to dissolve the Union and divide effects by negotiation. Both parties deprecated war, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive. The other would accept war rather than let it perish, and the war came. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest. All knew that this interest was, somehow, the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the object for which the insurgents would rend the Union, even by war, while the government claimed no right to do more than to restrict the territorial enlargement of it. Neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Neither anticipated that the cause of conflict might cease with, or even before, the conflict itself should cease. Each looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But let us judge not that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. If we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses which, in the providence of God, must needs come, but which, having continued through his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and that he gives to both North and South this terrible war, as the woe due to those by whom the offense came, shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in a living God always ascribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. That's just a notable example of how a president should sound. Having finished the history by Henry Adams, I am convinced more than ever that the two great figures to have arisen from our democracy were Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. On opposite sides of the political structure and at one point on opposite sides of the enslavement structure as well. As the government fails or simply transforms, as it transforms into another thing, those early founding fathers, Jefferson, Madison, become less vital. I knew it was a mistake when our country substituted for the birthday celebrations of Washington and Lincoln one all-purpose President's Day, because that means that we celebrate, say, George W. Bush equally with an Abraham Lincoln. Now I understand that the day should have been turned into, if anything, an Abraham Lincoln Day and gotten rid of George Washington. Both Washington and Jefferson were good men in their relatively narrow spheres. Insofar as a person who wrangles his maintenance, his food, off of the body of other unpaid laborers. I think now we agree that such owners of men do not meet with our standards today. Cicero himself was a slave owner and not pretty in hunting after his escaped slave. I only know of one instance. Much as George Washington was not pretty when he did the same. And I came away from the Henry Adams history pretty much disgusted with James Madison. He was a man hardly equipped for the task. But it is a task which probably no man is equipped for. I think the task fell beyond Jefferson to some degree. If anything, Washington may have been the perfect man at that hour. But It is not my desire to offer a history lesson. I don't understand the history yet after reading that. I understand that the course that this nation took was set with that War of 1812, when huge factions were hoping to gain all of Canada. And it was, by Madison, a war of choice. It was a war which need not have been embarked upon. I don't know if this country persists, if we make it through this election cycle with the instruments of government intact. But if we do, then somehow a priority has to be taken to eliminating the Electoral College and toward altering our national mythology. I think that such figures as Jefferson and Washington, Madison, need to be removed to the back burner, so to speak. Jefferson, of course, is remembered because he wrote so well. What was the line from the poem by Auden? Something about pardon Kipling and his views, and will pardon Paul Claudel, pardons him for writing well. Was it, I can't remember who's doing the pardoning. As a poet, my partisanship does not exist with a form of government. Let the people decide as they will. My partisanship has been with the language of the tribe, to use T.S. Eliot's phrase. With the English language. And we have a governing class which makes a mockery of the English language every day. I think my second big poem, the book, The Resurgiad, with its unfortunate title, takes some of that into account. I have laid down my pen. I no longer am an active contributor to the tradition, to use T.S. Eliot's phrase. Again, I do hope English goes on if humanity can survive the looming climate catastrophe. I don't know that it can. And so that's why presenting the works of John Keats yesterday was so important to me. I'm not sure where this channel will go. I first began the channel at the time of the contest between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I began it initially because I wanted to post a poem about a young man that was murdered in Kenosha at a rally during the course of this, an event which became immediately politicized. And his murderer is hailed in Republican circles as a good and great man. Of course, slanderers and murderers should not be hailed as great men. That is a big problem. It is, of course, not for me to address. But that was why this channel came into existence. I wanted to tweet a poem, which I wrote. I have it in a couple of forms on this YouTube page or whatever in my backlog. And so I wanted to distract myself from the election season, and I posted readings of poems, both my own, but mostly other standard established poets from that time until about the time of the January 6th insurrection. And then I let the channel go to rest. Now, simultaneously to that, I have been in the process of trying to become a better reader. And at some point, I happened upon BookTube. And so, not quite 2 years ago, but more than a year and a half ago, I became a booktuber. And so this channel, titled David Novak Reads Poetry, sort of transitioned into a BookTube channel, even though I disavowed poetry and said that poetry would not be the thing. I foresee further transitioning for this channel, even as our country is going to be making a transition into something which we cannot predict. I also cannot speak for the channel. At one time, I thought that I would just let it go dark. That probably does not make a lot of sense. But this week right now, I think particularly between now, as I say, this will be shown on November 1st. So between November 1st and the day of voting, and then probably immediately after, my thoughts have been too scattered. I have not been able to focus on a book. I dearly want to continue reading Mark Edward Lewis on China's cosmopolitan empire, I believe. But I can't get the focus, so I've instead been listening to pop music. Now I've got some Bach on the turntable. And I got such joy reading the Keats. It's possible I will move on to a focus with poetry again. I don't think so. But years ago, it was my great goal to create a reading series at the public library where I would break down the large figures of English poetry and do a session for each. I think in some cases I would add 2 to a session, and possibly in some situation I gave 2 sessions, like probably Shakespeare. I gave 1 to the poems and 1 to the plays, or something like. I don't remember. I have the notes toward this project filed away in the basement, and I thought, well, YouTube might be the ideal place for this, along the lines of the reading of John Keats, which I did. So that's a possibility of the direction I could see taking this. I probably will say no to that idea simply because I don't think I have the energy to carry it through. And on the other hand, the strictures or the constraints upon leaving it a channel which solely reports on the books I have been reading also does not feel adequate to where I would like it to go, if indeed I wish it to carry on. Now I realize most YouTube channels, most booktube channels are pretty free in what the presenter or the host allows. So we shall see where this goes. I may do more fireside chat videos of this sort. As I say, the fire has gotten pretty low here. Maybe I should blow on it to raise up some heat, but I'm not really sure that I can do any reading for a while, regardless. In the long run, I would like to continue this reading project, but for me, reading is best accomplished in tranquility. And right now, even if my mind were tranquil, I have not a tranquil heart. So until we pass this bridge, I doubt I can promise anything. I've been very, very appreciative of everybody who comes and watches this channel. And so it's not something that I intend to relinquish easily. But the writing of verse, if one sees himself as a poet, is almost all externally produced. So all of these different things came about for me from external causes, so to speak. It was a fortunate confluence. So everything which I wrote was a product of being in this country at this time, and indeed in this city at this time. I am an inhabitant of Chicago. As I say, it's possible that the muses will allow for future plays to get written, but I doubt it. I think I have 5 different play projects which I aborted because I wanted to try my hand at writing history plays. And the reading necessary for research was not available to me. And I don't think that I have improved sufficiently, because when one is researching for a play, you have to assimilate everything. And so you have to be able to plow through everything. And I have been unable to do that. And I don't see my reading getting to that level of attainment. And I am okay with letting the idea go. So there I lost my train of thought again. Regardless, whatever happens with this channel will be shaped, as my whole writing career has been, by externalities. And we shall see where it goes. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel and for listening.